I want to welcome you all to this opening of an Eames celebration, and I'm really happy about so many guests, so many friends of the Vitra Design Museum, guests from many different countries. Also welcome to Mayor Wolfgang Dietz of Weil am Rhein. And I'm really happy to also have a lot of members of the Eames family here tonight. And I think the long list of people that I will read out now shows also something about how special this opening tonight is. I want to welcome Eames Demetrios, grandson of Charles Eames and director of the Eames Office, who will give us a wonderful opening talk, I'm sure, later. Also with us is Carla Hartman, Byron Edward, Lucia Edward, Lisa Demetrios, Jackie Edward, Guthrie Demetrios, Martin Burstein, Sonia Burstein, and Shelley Mills. So they are all part of the Eames family, and if some other members have arrived since yesterday, I may have forgotten them, because that was the list of yesterday. Well, as I said, this list is really long, and it says something about how close the relation of Vitra, the Eames family, and the Vitra Design Museum is, because since more than 60 years now, there is a really close relation between the Eames family and the Fehlbaum family, who founded Vitra and who is still running Vitra today in the third generation with CEO Nora Fehlbaum. Rolf Fehlbaum, the initiator of the Vitra Design Museum, met Charles and Ray Eames in the late 1950s, so more than 60 years ago. And very often when we speak about design, I notice how important the lessons from Charles and Ray Eames are to Rolf as an entrepreneur, as a design collector, as a connoisseur of design. So there was a very long relation that continued after, in the 50s, there was the initial discovery of the Eameses by the Fehlbaum, I was saying the Vitra family, which is true as well. And then in the 1960s and 70s, Vitra grew by producing Eames furniture into an internationally successful design manufacturer. And Vitra, of course, is still producing today a lot of the iconic Eames pieces that you will also see in the exhibitions. In 1988, when Ray Eames died, the Vitra Design Museum took over a part of the wonderful estate of prototypes and study models that Charles and Ray Eames developed in the Eames Office. And this is probably one of the most important holdings that we have in the Vitra Design Museum's collection. The collection comprises more than 7,000 pieces of furniture by many different designers, but among these pieces we also have some personal archives and estates by George Nelson, Alexander Girard, Anton Lorenz, and as I was saying, I think among these different figures, the Eames collection in the museum is probably the most important individual holding that we have, and I think it's also the largest collection of Eames furniture that exists in a museum worldwide. So given this importance of Charles and Ray Eames for the Vitra Design Museum, we already did a first Eames exhibition in 1997, and some of you may have seen this exhibition. It traveled to other places in Europe, in the United States. It was realized already in collaboration with the Eames family, with the Library of Congress. And since then, we thought again and again that it might be time again to do another exhibition on Charles and Ray Eames. And the result is what we're opening tonight. We are opening not only one exhibition, we open a whole series of 4 exhibitions, and it's the first time for the Vitra Design Museum that we are devoting 4 different exhibition spaces on the Vitra campus only to one designer, or to one designer couple. And what you will be able to see tonight is in the Vitra Design Museum, the exhibition Charles and Ray Eames, The Power of Design. This is a retrospective on the Eames' work that has been organized and curated by the Barbican Art Gallery, by Catherine Inns and her team at the Barbican Art Gallery. So this may be a good start to discover the Eames' work in the other exhibitions, because it gives an overview from the early works until the late works, the different disciplines in which the Eames' worked. But you can as well start in another place on the campus. For example, at the Vitra Schau Depot on the other side of the campus. There we are showing the prototypes and study models of Charles and Ray Eames in the context of the display of some highlights of the collection. We are also showing an exhibition about the films of Charles and Ray Eames in the Vitra Fire Station, which is also on that side of the campus. And we are showing in the Vitra Design Museum Gallery, which is again close to the museum building, an exhibition called Play Parade, an Eames exhibition for kids, which is exploring the many toys and other objects you can play with that Charles and Ray Eames designed, but they also did films about these objects. They did research on what playing actually means as a source of creativity, of inspiration. So you have the choice between these 4 exhibitions, and it really doesn't matter in which order you discover them. By walking through these exhibitions, you will surely discover again how important and how fascinating the world of the Eameses is. On the one hand, they designed furniture. You may recognize a lot of those very famous pieces. They did graphic design, architecture, they did interiors, exhibitions, but they were also doing excellent work in the field of media installations and film. And for them, this was not contradictory at all, because for them, doing a piece of furniture, creating an Eames House, or doing a film were all tools to explore the world around us and to discover how we can improve this world and how we can improve the quality of life, whether through a film, through an object, through a house, through an exhibition. And this transdisciplinary approach that Charles and Ray Eames developed is probably as wide as with very, very few other designers in history. And compared to the exhibition in 1997, we are today looking at the work of the Eameses from the 21st century in a digitalized era. And I think this context today shows especially how ahead of their time they were. Because looking at the Eameses today, we discover that they already thought about computers. They already thought about data. They were makers. Today, a lot of discussion and design exists about making, makers culture. The Eames made things in that similar spirit. So I think the context today, in 2017, really creates this new world and this new opportunity of discovering the work of Charles and Ray Eames. To realize this 4-exhibition series and a wonderful book that you can buy in the exhibition spaces, it needed a lot of collaborators and supporters and partners. And I would like to thank above all the Eames family, the Eames Office and the Eames Foundation for their great support. I will not mention all the names again, but many of you were involved. So really thank you very much for that great collaboration, which I hope will go on in the future. I also want to thank Catherine Inns from the Barbican Art Gallery and her great team for the collaboration on the exhibition in the Gary Building. Charles and Ray Eames, The Power of Design. I don't know where Catherine is. Thank you very much, Catherine. I also want to thank our colleagues from Herman Miller and the Herman Miller Archive, who also contributed to the research that was necessary for all exhibitions, for the book we published. And thank you very much. I think it's a great collaboration between the Vitra Design Museum and the Herman Miller Archive. So thank you very much for this ongoing exchange of knowledge. I also want to thank our sponsors and partners. I want to thank our main sponsor, Hugo Boss, who is now collaborating with us for the 3rd time on an exhibition, and we really appreciate that support that you are giving to our museum, and I think it's a great collaboration that creates many results, also beyond putting a logo somewhere. I think you're you have a great cultural program at Hugo Boss, and we're really happy to be part of that. Thank you very much. There are further sponsors I also want to really thank. There is Implenia, a construction company that gave significant support to the exhibition. Then there is the Sparkasse Markgräfler Land, who also supported the exhibition. And I want to especially thank the city of Weil am Rhein, who also supported this exhibition financially, also ideally. And I think especially the support of the Sparkasse Markgräfler Land and the city shows that the legacy of Charles and Ray Eames that we are keeping here at the Vitra Design Museum at Vitra has an international significance, but also a regional importance, because we want to establish more collaborations with the city, with local and regional institutions to also make this heritage accessible to the region, because I think it's a treasure to discover for the people that live here in Weil am Rhein and the surroundings, but it's also a factor that attracts people from all over the world to come to this beautiful city. So thank you very much, Mr. Dietz. So now I'm nearly done with thanking people, but it's really dear to me to thank all of our great colleagues at the Vitra Design Museum, because it's really a challenge to do one exhibition at one time, but it's even more challenging to open 4 exhibitions at one time. And I want to thank really this great team with whom we are now working for really a long time, and which includes great experts as Jolante Kugler, our curator that was responsible for the whole Eames celebration, Assistant Curator Tanja Kunz, Curator Hang Zi, Susanne Graner and her team from the Collection Department, Katrin Hager and the Visitor Services team, Iris Mikain and the Communications team, and Constanze Lange and so many others. I'm sure I've forgotten many, but really thank you to this great team, because they are doing again and again for every exhibition this incredible work. Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to hand over to Jördis Kettenbach, Head of Cultural Affairs at Hugo Boss, our main sponsor.
Thank you, Matteo. So no long speech from the sponsor, I promise. First of all, good evening and a warm welcome, everybody. We are very excited to be part of this amazing project. After, Matteo just mentioned, after Konstantin Gricic and the Bauhaus exhibitions, this is our 3rd collaboration with the Vitra Museum, and we are, and it shows that we have a very good relation, and that it's a wonderful work together with the museum and its team. Supporting the exhibition on the design icons Charles and Ray Eames is a matter of heart for the company and for me personally. I admit that I have some pieces at home. And yes, we therefore like to thank Matteo Gries, Mark Zentner, of course Jolante Kugler, and the entire team of the Vitra Design Museum for the wonderful collaboration. And finally, we would like to thank the family of Charles and Ray Eames, namely Eames Demetrios, for his support and for his trust. Thank you all very much, and I wish you a wonderful evening.
Okay, before handing over to Eames, I just wanted to explain very briefly how the evening continues after the talk. As I said, all 4 exhibition spaces are open. You can choose where you want to walk. You can walk through the main street here on the campus. There are drinks at all places, so you don't have to focus on one place. There will be no more speeches. Sometimes there are speeches in one place, but don't care about that. This was the opening speech, so you don't miss anything when you walk around. And now I'm really happy to introduce Eames Demetrios, and I'm looking forward to some great insights into Charles and Ray Eames' life and work. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.
Thanks, Matteo. Great insights, huh? So that's a little bit of pressure to put on here. But before I do anything, I would actually like to ask my siblings to stand up. Byron, my brother Byron, managing partner of the Eames Office. Sister Carla, the director of education of the Eames Office. Sister Lucia, director of the 250-year project at the foundation. And Sister Lisa, who is our registrar. There you are. And okay, thank you. And I encourage you to talk to them. They're very nice people, and we all have our own stories and our own ways of how Charles and Ray influenced us. And I like I said, they don't bite. We're all well brought up. If you ever met our mother, you would know that. So I wanted to did want to share some ideas about Charles and Ray and their work. And you know, there's so many places to start. And actually, this is we probably won't have time. But if there were something that you really felt I should have shown instead of what I do show, you can feel free to ask me, and we can go with that. So let's see. Let me look at the picture. Okay, hold on. So, the screen is not working exactly right, but I think we'll make it work. Okay. So that actually was a clip from an Eames film called Toccata for Toy Trains, and what I wanted to do is to share a little bit of how Charles and Ray approached the world, and because for me personally, as beautiful as the objects you're going to see in this exhibit are, or you've seen already in your home, and that you live with, the ideas behind them are just as beautiful and just as important to me. And so, and what you can see when you look at their work, like I'm going to show you, these are some pieces you might recognize. And let's see, so you probably recognize the wire chair, the famous bird, the rocker, molded plywood chair. But then these are some chairs you won't recognize probably, and these are ones that, and some of these prototypes are in the exhibition. And these are important also because for Charles and Ray, design was an iterative process. They were always trying to improve the designs. In fact, even after a piece would start being manufactured by Vitra, they would try to make it better. And this design process never ended for them. And some of these chairs are pretty cool. Some of them, like there's a you saw that three-legged chair. Really great idea until you reach over to pick up your purse and you fall on your face. So, you know, you have to, it's very, there was a very learn by doing spirit there. And, you know, this is experiments for the wire chair. And one of the interesting things about their work is that you're going to see some drawings in the exhibition. This is a tool they did to figure out the ergonomics of the early chairs. One of the things you're going to see, though, is you'll see some sketches of Eames furniture in the exhibition, but almost all those sketches were done after the chairs were designed. For Charles and Ray, they were always three-dimensionally modeling, which is, again, one of the reasons I think their work continues to feel so contemporary. Because what they would do is that they would make not only would they figure out how to make the chair, they would also make the prototype. And what that puts on the designer is a very interesting responsibility, because when you sketch something, I'm sure anybody who's had their house worked on or their apartment worked on has had the experience when you look at the design and somebody else looks at it and you are imagining two totally different things. And so the question is that if Charles and Ray are collaborating, how do they design the same chair? And the answer is that they were always doing these three-dimensional models. In fact, there's a beautiful letter from Charles to Ray where he says, "We must see each other soon. This business of being dream people in each other's minds is no good." And aside from being incredibly romantic, it also really talks about their design process, because what it means is that they weren't trying to design an imaginary chair. They really wanted to bring something really into the world. And bring something real into the world is not simply making one of them. It's creating a system to make that chair again and again. And one of my favorites of the chairs is the aluminum group chair, because you could only design that chair if you knew exactly how to make it. And as Matteo indicated, there's a whole special place, I think, in the heart of the maker movement, which has a lot to do with how Charles and Ray approach things. One of the places the journey with the Vitra Design Museum started was right here, and this is the 901 workspace that Charles and Ray did most of their work in. And we all went there as kids, and it was a really magical place to visit. If any of you have been to Los Angeles, there's a shopping street called Abbot Kinney. That's where the Eames office is now. It's a little swankier now than it was back then. But you would walk through that door, and it was really like walking into another world. And this is where a lot of the prototypes that are going to be in the exhibition where they lived. And you can see how it was so interesting, because it was kind of a curated space, and yet it was always alive and dynamic. You see this beautiful whale that will be swimming above you when you go into the show. The library with this great ladder that was on wheels. And somebody once said that, that the Eames office, the workshop, was Charles's instrument, and he knew exactly how to play it. And this is where, and the other thing that's interesting about this office is that we now take for granted many of the things that they did. There's the flag of India in the background. In other words, they had a full black and white lab, a color lab, a place to make movies, a workshop, all these different, the ability to make just about anything. And what that means is that in a way they were desktop publishing before that was even a concept. And you continued, and then there was always magic somewhere in this area that we're about to enter, is where the aquariums that they had when they designed an aquarium. And this experience was also very important to me personally, because it was in the process of making this film that I realized that I really cared, how much I cared about their work, and that really I wanted to be helping our mother take care of that responsibility, and now all 5 of us are doing that. And maybe wondering about the soundtrack. And this was a musical tower the Eames has designed. And when we visited, we could probably get about 40 marbles going at once. And I can't believe that they regarded our appearance with unalloyed happiness. I think they were sometimes wondering, and poor Dick Donges would have to climb up to the top of the ladder and pour in the marbles. But what's interesting about about the musical tower is that it's a great example of how they were willing to surrender to the design journey when they were working on something. And in this case, what I mean is that they actually intended this to be part of the Time Life building lobbies. And there are and they designed it, and it was really cool. And the Time Life building is what they designed, what we call the lobby chair that we make with Vitra. And what's interesting is that it actually has a lot of problems in terms of being in a public space. So they didn't, in the end, use it in the lobbies. But they didn't say we failed or that was stupid, why did we waste our time? They said, okay, well, actually, maybe it just belongs here at the office. And they just had a very philosophical spirit, that it was really about the journey of exploration that they went on. One of the ideas that I think that's so beautiful of theirs is they used to say that the role of the designer is basically that of a good host anticipating the needs of the guest. And to me, that's a very beautiful idea, and it's also an idea that you don't need to be a designer to enjoy or take advantage of, because it's really, I personally really wish we would teach design not only as a professional skill, but as a life skill. And I think when you think about ideas like that, it really, you can use that idea of being a good host to run a business, to design a menu, to do all sorts of things. And I think that spirit is really important. And you're going to see in this exhibit some examples of very extreme guest hosting that Charles and Ray did. They also had they also had this belief that of iterating things and, like I said, trying them out, as you saw with the prototypes. But the fascinating thing is that they were very inspired by folk design, because they felt in a way that what they were doing with all those prototypes was really no different than happened in a village, a couple hundred years ago, where people who were doing folk design would try version after version. As they would say, many of these objects are designed by generations of use, not by any one designer, but by people using them again and again. They also believed, they were very skeptical of style, which is interesting today, because these days the word style and the word design are used interchangeably, but they're actually very different things. And I'm going to give you an example of that. There are 2 projects that you'll see in the exhibition. One is the Eames House, which is probably their most important architectural achievement and our formal architecture achievement. And there's also the molded plastic chair, with a lot of you are familiar with. What's important to me about this particular pairing of projects is they were working on both these designs in 1949 at the same time. And they didn't say, but they didn't try to impose a unified style on them. They didn't say, our style is curves, we need to put them on the Eames House. Our style is grids, we need to put them on the chair. They just solved each problem the best way they could. And I think that to me is very telling. The Eames House itself, you're seeing a film that Charles and Ray did about the Eames House. And I think this is a good time to point out that both Vitra and Herman Miller, who make our furniture, are founding sponsors of the Eames Foundation, and we're very grateful to Hugo Boss for joining that support, and it means a lot to all of us in the family. But I think you can see that one of the things that they said was important to them in terms of learning about approaching design is the experience they had designing the tools for making the furniture and making the splints. And the reason that they said that is that when they were designing something, they didn't think about how it looked. What they were thinking about was, did it solve the problem? And so if you look at it that way, everything you see in that exhibit is actually a tool. And the chairs are tools for sitting in a way. And the interesting thing about designing tools is that there are no points for making a beautiful tool. If you make a beautiful hammer and it breaks right away, then it's not that beautiful. You don't like it. Nobody saves a broken hammer. You just throw it away. And I think that and yet at the same time, we've all had that experience of going to a museum where they've saved a lot of old tools, or an old carpenter shop or something like that, and you go there and you just see the beauty of these objects. And I think that again, from the standpoint of their design, the intention was to be sure that the beauty came from the purity of the way that the object served its purpose and solved its problem. They really felt that that was the key to the design problem, to the design process, was to really focus on the end use. I'm going to give everybody a test now, if that's okay. I apologize for the lack of warning. But if it makes you feel better, our mother passed it when she was 5 years old, so you can feel very, very comfortable. This is a letter. This is a letter that our mother wrote that Charles wrote to our mom when he was working on a church in Arkansas, and so I thought we would all try to read it together. See a little kind of nervousness here. So let's see what we got here. So it says, "Dear family," it says, "Dear our grandmother, our mom, Mother Lucia, and her dog." And so it says, "Dear family," and then in baseball, what do? You take the bat and you hit. Hit was, and then what's the angel? Not an angel. Fairy. And then what's in the tongs there, that cube? Ice. So it was very nice. And then next is too fast. Somebody said fast. This was a 5-year-old girl. That does not mean fast, okay? Let's just be very clear about that. But to find. So in English, a horse has 4 quarters and hindquarters. So, what's right in your head? Hat. So that, D, light, full, letter. So it was very nice to find that delightful letter. Okay. So our mother's name was Lucia, and her nickname was Lukey's. Pitcher, okay. Lukey's pitcher was, okay. Our most famous president? Abe, very good. U-T. Lukey's pitcher was a beauty. Now, just to show you how hardcore this whole business of rebus is, what is the word "was" written on? Can you see at the top it said? Someone in the back? I mean, the guys in the front are doing the heavy lifting, so we need some help. It's a deed. So it actually says Lukey's picture was indeed a beauty. Okay. Last line. You use it in the garden? Ho, good. That's a really deep hole. Pit is, what do you do with the rope? Not. Cold. I hope it is not too cold there. Love the old man. So, very good, everybody. You've earned those. Yeah. This is the best crowd ever. You love applauding. This is really good. It's very, very validating. But this kind of, it really gives you some of Charles's spirit. Yep. And I think it also shows how important images were to them. And there's a filmmaker you might have heard of named Paul Schrader. He's kind of best known for having written the screenplay for Taxi Driver. And he said that Charles was the one who taught him an image could be an idea. And I think that's one of the many ways that they were so ahead of their time in terms of visual culture and things like that, is that they really were, I mean, at the same time that the Vitra Design Museum received the collection of prototypes, we donated 850,000 photographs to the Library of Congress that the Eameses and the Eames Office had taken. And that's extraordinary. We're actually 5% of the Prints and Photograph Division of the Library of Congress, which is the biggest collection in the world. So again, that tells you something about, I mean, of course, now you can have that money on your phone, but it was a time when it was all taken with 35 millimeter film. And the point is that they really wove photography into their daily life in a very meaningful way. And they would draw from that for exhibitions. You're going to see some beautiful prints that were images that were selected for the show. But it's really a striking aspect of their work. And again, the other thing is that, you know, now we are used to this idea of carrying a camera. I mean, I sometimes call this my camera, not my phone. And I'm sure we've all done that at some point. And so they really believed that photography was a way to have your cake and eat it too, to have the pleasure of the moment and to have the pleasure of sharing it with other people without really losing anything. And there is Charles's sister, our beloved Aunt Adele, was quite an amazing person, and she one time called Charles after there had been a big hurricane, something unfortunately on all of our minds back in the States. There was a big hurricane, and it had pretty much flooded and wiped out their town. And of course, people didn't have cell phones then, so there was a line for the payphone, and she called Charles and said, "Don't worry, the family's okay. Their house is floating down Main Street. The trees are uprooted, but we're okay. And we'll talk to you in a few days." And thus assured, Charles said, "Yes, but did you get pictures?" And I think when you look at some of those films, especially in the fire station, because there's a strong loop there, what you'll see is that a lot of those films have a "did you get pictures" kind of feeling, in the sense that they are trying to capture something. Sometimes it's as simple as a jellyfish that was in their tank, or the process of making some of the furniture, and that spirit was throughout the office, and even some of their exhibitions have a bit of that quality. One of the other things that I think is important to understand about Charles and Ray is their way of thinking. I mean, they were truly wonderful thinkers. And I'm going to show you this. The next interview is part of a group of oral histories that the Eames office did. We've done about 200 hours of them. You're going to see some of them in the Chateau. And this is an interview with a guy named Ray Redheffer, who was quite a character, amazing guy. And he was the key consultant on the Mathematica exhibition. And I think on the first floor of the exhibition, there's a little section about Mathematica. And what he's talking about here is a little bit of how Charles's mind worked. So this is a little interview. I'm going to turn up the sound a little bit, and let's see what he has to say.
I especially like this one, mainly because it's so good. but also because it's something that Charles Eames did completely on his own. He came entirely independently to me one day and said, look, here's a Venn diagram. I had objected to the old Venn diagram, you see, which uses colored things. It's supposed to show the intersection of sets, this set and that, and the intersection is here. And colors don't mix that way. And it doesn't matter whether it's additive or subtractive. They are not a good analog for the union and intersection of sets. And I told Charles this and said that I didn't know how to fix it. So next day he came with this gorgeous thing, which I've never seen in any book, a problem 150 years old, Venn diagram, and it is astonishingly good from the mathematical point of view. You're talking about sets. This thing has red things in it. That's a set of red things, and all the red things are in here. And this thing contains objects with holes. That's the black dot. And all the objects with holes are there. And this one contains cubes. Everything that's in here is a cube, and all the cubes are in there. And now when you look at the part in the two circles, this part here, are around like that, then what you see is cubes because it's in this circle, with holes because it's in this circle. That's cubes with holes. That's the exact intersection. It's exactly what it should be. And here are red things with holes, and this is red cubes. And in the very center, you have red cubes with holes. And you can completely read off the structure of sets from this.
Okay, good. Sorry about that.
And I like that partly because mathematicians have known about this for, as I say, a century and a half, and never came up with anything remotely as good as what Charles did on the back of an envelope.
And what's great about that story, and if you didn't quite, what he's talking about, he says is a Venn diagram. So it's the Venn diagram where it has the overlap. And what to me is important about that is that when the Eameses designed something, they never delegated understanding. They always wanted the learning to happen in the office so the design could reflect that. In other words, they didn't say to Ray Redheffer, you know, tell us what to say and we're going to make it look pretty. Instead, they wanted to go on that journey of discovery themselves so that the representations and all the exhibits in there would sort of capture that thinking. And so that attitude, I mean, when they were working on an aquarium, they actually had these big aquaria at the office, and because again, they wanted to learn about what it really takes to take care of these sea creatures. And for me, it's indirectly related to one of my favorite stories of being with Charles and Ray, which is that when I was a kid, I volunteered at the Municipal Aquarium in San Francisco. I volunteered at the Municipal Aquarium, and by a huge, convoluted set of circumstances, I ended up going on an expedition to swim with a 10-meter-long whale shark. And that was very exciting, and I'm amazed our parents let me go, but they did the right thing. But the night before I was going to leave is that Charles showed up very unexpectedly, and he said, you know, Ray and I have been thinking about your trip, and we're really worried about it. They weren't worried about the shark because they knew that these sharks are very peaceful, peace-loving, and they said, and so he said, but we've been worried that you're going to borrow your parents' Nikon, and you're going to be so afraid of dropping it in the water that you won't take any good pictures. In fact, you'll just leave it in the room. And it was so amazing because I had been totally stressed out about that. I just had this really worry that I was going to be the one to drop, you know, my parents' Nikon into the Pacific Ocean. And what they gave me was a really inexpensive camera. And it was a time when those first sort of point-and-shoot 35-millimeter cameras came out. And it was exactly what I needed, because they could have bought me my own Nikon, but it wouldn't have changed my fear. What I needed was permission to take a chance with the camera and go out and be in the moment with the camera. And my first pictures that were ever published were taken with that camera. But again, if you think about it for a second as a design statement, it's about appropriateness. And that's what design is if you think about it. A lot of it is about the appropriateness of the solution to the problem it's trying to solve. And our mother had, to show that it kind of works symmetrically, you might say. Our mother had the inverse experience. When she was a kid, she would go with Charles and would be painting with him, and he would give her sable hair brushes, so the most expensive kind. And people would come up to them and say, how can you waste sable hair brushes on a child? And Charles would say, it's not for her, it's for me, because by making sure that by giving her the best possible brushes and that they're expensive, I'm going to make sure she cleans them, and therefore I'm going to really teach her about taking care of her tools, which is really the most important lesson. So it wasn't about the fancy brushes or the fancy camera or the cheap brushes or the cheap camera. It was about appropriateness. And again, you'll see it throughout this beautiful exhibit, throughout this beautiful celebration, that again and again what you're seeing is what Charles and Ray called way it should be-ness. That if something is really well designed, the idea of it having been designed won't come up at all. And it's that spirit of appropriateness and really thinking about the other person and imagining where that other person fits, or where this object or exhibition or film fits into those people's lives. I wanted to. We also have one of our favorite. As I think I speak for all of us. We all really love this the molded plywood elephant that Charles and Ray designed. So I thought I would just give you a little glimpse of that. And one of the things that's lovely about this elephant is that, and we brought it out recently, this is actually a documentary about Los Angeles. And we have elephants all over the place. Now, one of the reasons I think they designed this elephant is that the great thing about a toy is the toy is the essence of the thing. And so this is the essence of elephant. And even a 5-year-old kid can tell you whether it's a good elephant or not. And it's a good elephant. We take elephant safety very seriously in Los Angeles. So now, the first elephant that they made, yeah, it's when you come to LA, you'll see them everywhere. But that elephant that's in the exhibition was actually one that we played with as kids, and it had been given to our mom. And the point of that is that these objects that they made, they were not intended to be hyper precious. They wanted them to be used and lived with. And in fact, one of our challenges working with Vitra was we wanted to bring the elephants out, but it's actually more complicated to make each part of the elephant than it is to make the molded plywood chair. So we had to think about what that would mean, and in the end, We did it in plywood, and it's a beautiful object, but we also made it in plastic. And I kind of think in some funny way, it took two materials for us to express Charles and Ray's original intention and vision for that object. Because believe me, with the plywood elephants, I think maybe 5 children have actually played with the plywood elephant because they are expensive, but they're beautiful and they're amazing sculptures. And so the plastic elephant, and now its adolescent cousin, is one that kids can bring into their lives and enjoy. I wanted to, first of all, not fight too hard with Matteo's promise of drinks everywhere. It seems very, very, very cruel to keep you any longer than the exact minute. But I did want to share a couple of things that I think inform the whole exhibit. And one is that I think that one of the most important experiences of Charles's life, in fact, you might even say a turning point in his life, happened during the Depression when he was in Mexico for about 8 months. And he was there, and the Depression had started in the U.S., and it was devastating around the world, obviously. But the thing about it was that, people felt that they had lost everything. And he spent 8 months in Mexico, and he was struck by the fact that he was with people who almost literally had nothing. And he was struck by the fact that they had rich emotional lives, rich spiritual lives, rich cultural lives. They just didn't have any money. And he realized that taught him an important lesson, that you really could live on just about nothing. And what that meant to him is that he had to stop using making a living as his excuse for doing things he didn't believe in. And it changed his design practice, as we would say now. It changed his approach to the world. And really, they lived that for the rest of he lived that the rest of his life, and I think it was a credo that resonated with Ray as well. And the reason why that's important is that sometimes when you look at this huge spectrum of work that Charles and Ray did, people say, well, of course they did a lot of things because they got successful with the furniture and then they were able to do these other things. But that's not actually how it works, how it worked for them. So the first really big economic success for them was the plastic chair. And that came out in, say, 1950. By New Year's Eve, 1949, Charles and Ray had made toys, they'd made furniture, they'd made architecture, they'd made textiles, they'd made graphics, they'd made movies, they'd made exhibitions, they had explored multimedia, which is another thing they would become known for. So the point wasn't that this was sort of some icing on the cake or some bonus. This holistic vision of design was integral to the way they approached things. There's even a letter where Charles says to Ray, "Let's go to Hollywood, and we're going to make films on short films on modern architecture and the honest use of materials." And I have to say, if you've ever read anything about Hollywood in the 40s, there were very few people who that's what they were coming there to do. They were coming there to make the features and things like that. What that really shows and also that letter showed me that from the very beginning, Charles and Ray, in their partnership, imagined a life of work and love together from the beginning. And I think that's also really striking and also unusual for that time. The last thing that I wanted to share with you was to give you a little bit of a flavor of the spirit of working at the office. And so I'm going to show you this little clip, and it's about a project. It's a guy named Alex Funke speaking, and this is a group, part of these oral histories that we did. And he's talking about a project called the Newton House of Cards. And I'll play a little of this for you.
IBM was lucky enough to have like 4 or 5 Nobel laureates one year. Like everybody who won the Nobel Prize worked for IBM in either chemistry or mathematics or physics or whatever. Josephson was there and a whole bunch of guys. And so CE as a treat, because these guys were going to be honored. They were coming back from the awards. They're going to be an honor, the big banquet. And we decided to make them, Charles decided to make them each a deck of cards that would be images from the life of Newton. You've got everything you need within the walls of 901 to do this. You don't have to ask anybody. You're paying for it yourself. You don't have to justify it. All you're going to do is somebody's going to walk into that banquet with a box and hand it to these guys. These are all color prints and black and white prints, and they're individually blind embossed by John Newhart by spraying with water and burnishing it down into an engraved plate. And everybody in the whole office, I mean, Emily Maeda is in there rolling stuff out, and Ray is cutting, and everybody worked. There wasn't a soul in the office that wasn't working on some aspect of these cards. Night and day, it was a marvel. It was the most thrilling roller coaster, and there's literally a thing where it has to be like, and of course, in the meantime, Randy walks back into the shop making a special wooden carrying case, and it's going to be hand carried, and it's going to like get a police escort to get Dave Only to the airport with this box under his arm so he can get on the plane, so he can get to New York, so he can dash to the banquet. He'll roll in 15 minutes before it's time to deliver it to the guys. It's all calculated, split-second timing. Quick, Dave's got to go to the airport. We got to take a picture. Dave's got to go to the airport. Take the picture. So it's like Dave's there with the wooden box, and when we shoot the picture of everybody who worked on this thing, and then Dave's out the door, dashing out the door with the wooden box of cards, and then everybody says, "Oh, wow, all right."
That's some of the spirit that made what you see there. That whole self-reliance, that combination of vision, the ability to make a Venn diagram, the first good Venn diagram in 150 years, but also the practical part that you could actually put gold leaf around all these cards. So I'm going to just close with one last thought, probably one of my favorite of Charles and Ray's quotes. They said that at all places, meaning in this sense in all societies, love and discipline have made for a beautiful environment and a good life. I wish you both tonight. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, Eames, for this indeed most insightful talk. Just a quick reminder before you all storm out. We invite you to really see all the 4 exhibition venues that we have today. So don't forget about the shower depot and the fire station on the other side of the campus. We have drinks and food prepared on both locations. So don't worry. And I'm fairly certain the Eames family will spread out as well. So if you do want to follow the invitation and talk to these lovely people, best to explore the whole campus. Thank you and have a lovely evening.